You're going to. Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight on this Wednesday, May 29th.
All right, so, sir, we'll take your issue under advisement. We're going to move forward. Alderman Harris.
The Exchange. Find out why Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Alderman Ed Burke got into a testy stare down as she faced her first major legislative test.
Prohibition's not working. It's time to come up with a better policy.
Legalizing marijuana. The debate is on tonight in the Illinois Senate. Amanda Vinicky is live in Springfield. Behind the scenes at Mayor Lightfoot's first City Council meeting and the flurry of activity in Springfield in our weekly edition of Spotlight Politics.
Russian intelligence officers who were part of the Russian military launched a concerted attack on our political system.
Special counsel Robert Mueller says his team did not determine whether President Donald Trump committed a crime or not. Former U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hegel is here to weigh in.
And nothing can replace having him here in the studio with us.
Bob Fosse's childhood dance partner, now 91, teaches their old routines to young dancers. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist David Marinus turns his biographer's eye to his father's experiences during the Red Scare.
Everything we've planted thus far in the garden is doing very well.
And gardener Gene Nolan returns with more advice on growing your own food. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brandis Friedman. We begin tonight with news from City Hall. Mayor Lightfoot faced her first legislative test today. This as City Council's longest-serving alderman, Ed Burke, tried to give her a test of his own. It led to one of the more memorable and feisty exchanges in recent City Council history. How did Lightfoot fare? Paris Schutz is here to break it down. Paris.
Well, you'll get to see that for yourself, Brandis. And Alderman Ed Burke, as you know, he may be facing criminal charges in a forthcoming indictment, but it did not stop him from trying to scuttle the new mayor's agenda today. Burke rose in the city council to object to the new council rules of order that Lightfoot put forth, claiming that these rules aren't gender neutral. And then he proceeded to read off every single rule that referred to the pronoun he instead of the gender neutral he/she. So Burke said the rules should be amended to accommodate that, but Lightfoot eventually grew impatient with his argument and turned the tables on him.
Alderman Burke, you've been in the City Council for approximately 50 years, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're a lawyer, is that also correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're aware that under the terms of the law, and particularly as provided in the municipal code, that gender, whether it's designated as his or her, applies with equal force. So if you're making an objection, please make it so we can move forward. Is your general concern that the rules have a gender designation and not his or her? Is that the gist of it?
That's it. And
is there any other thing that you want to call to the chair's attention?
no.
All right, so, sir, we'll take your issue under advisement. We're going to move forward. Alderman Harris. Alderman, please. Alderman, I will call you when I'm ready to hear from you.
So Mayor Lightfoot serving notice that this is not the 1980s, Brandis, and there will be no council wars on her watch if she has her druthers. And council did move on despite Burke's repeated attempts to interject himself and his argument. Some council members afterwards said they felt Lightfoot maybe was a little harsh in her tone with her, but later Lightfoot said that Burke's move was a stunt, and she says it deserved to be called out.
Alderman Burke is somebody who likes to test people. He likes to see if there are weaknesses. And he has attempted to do this in the past with me, and he's failed spectacularly every time. And every time he tries it, he will again fail spectacularly. The notion that Ed Burke, fill in the history, is somehow now concerned about gender equity is laughable. It was just a stunt.
Now, Paris, this took some of the attention away from the issue of the day, of course, which is the mayor's plan to rearrange city council. How'd that go?
Well, if this was her first major legislative test, Brandis, she aced it with flying colors. The vote was for city council to confirm her selections for chairmanships of 18 council committees. There was some mystery in the weeks leading up to this as to whether aldermen might rebuke her, but the vote was a landslide today. They didn't even have a roll call. Instead, it was a simple group vote of aye or no, and the ayes were overwhelming. And there you see Alderman Scott Wagasback. With this vote, he becomes the new chairman of the very powerful City Council Finance Committee, replacing Ed Burke, who had chaired that very powerful committee for several decades. Now, it's not the same committee that he chaired because the whole city workers' compensation program has been taken away, so the committee will have half the $1.3 million budget that it's had in years past. Now, this vote was not without its detractors, including Alderman Ray Lopez, who says the new mayor is trying to create a rubber stamp city council.
I have concerns because it feels like this was created in a silo without the full consideration of all my colleagues here. And you've made it abundantly clear today that you're not trying to hear us. As we move forward, she's not looking for dissent. She's not looking for the open, independent council that she campaigned on. She wants her rubber stamp group. She wants to get her agenda through, and obviously she's acting like she's got somewhere to go. So, it's disappointing. She could feel as aggressive as she needs to be to get her agenda done, but at the end of the day, she still has to work with all 50 of us, whether she likes it or not.
Lightfoot later parsed no words in dismissing Lopez's opposition.
Well, Alderman Lopez should spend more time trying to actually reach out and be collaborative rather than vent himself in the media. He's carrying the water for Alderman Burke. That was obvious. It's been obvious for a long time. It's obvious today. But if he wants to reach out in collaboration, he knows my number.
Lightfoot also had harsh words for 9th Ward Alderman Anthony Beal, who has also been critical of her council reorganization, mainly because he's been left out. He was the former chairman of the Transportation Committee. He doesn't have any committee chairmanship in this new plan. In other council news today, the City Council's Black Caucus, the Aldermanic Black Caucus, selected a new leader, and that is 28th Ward Alderman Jason Irvin. So a lot of maneuvering today. First major test for new Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Of course, we will break down this a lot further in our Spotlight Politics segment later on.
A lot to talk about, Paris. We'll see you in a bit. Right. Thank you. Now moving from City Hall to the seat of state government, where lawmakers are on the precipice of legalizing marijuana. Chicago Tonight's Amanda Vinicky joins us live from the State House in Springfield. Amanda, how close is Illinois to making it legal to buy and use cannabis?
Brandis, nearly there, really. Just about 10 minutes ago, the Senate, on a vote of 38 to 17, passed a measure that will allow anyone 21 or older to use or buy marijuana starting in January. Anyone who knows their schoolhouse rock knows that that doesn't mean the measure is law yet. It still needs to go to the other chamber and then be signed into law by the governor. But J.B. Pritzker is an ardent supporter of recreational cannabis adult use. He campaigned on it, and so really that's pretty much a given. And given that lopsided vote in the Senate, we can, nothing is definite, but we could expect the House to follow in the footsteps of the Senate in the next couple of days. Sponsoring Senator Heather Staines, she's a Chicago Democrat, introduced a new version of the legislation just today to help make sure of it.
Big picture is that we know prohibition's not working. It's time to come up with a better policy. We want social justice, safety for our kids, and the state to realize additional revenue. Now, I think the bill that we've been doing presents really balanced approach to this.
So, Amanda, lawmakers who had been reticent are now on board. What changed from the plan originally introduced earlier this month?
Republicans had been particularly wary that the original version was too liberal in expunging the records of people who are previously either in jail or have on their records drug offenses. This new version does still make expungement possible, and that's something that's very important to legislators who say that the war on drugs has very much disproportionately punished minorities. The revised bill manages to make both sides happy, in part by doing away with automatic expungement for people that have been punished for, say, higher levels of possession or sales, but it still makes that path toward expungement possible. So to the point even that 2 GOP senators are even co-sponsors of the marijuana measure. Concerned businesses are also pacified. The Chamber of Commerce had been opposed to the measure because businesses were fearful they weren't going to be able to perform drug testing or manage employees who perhaps would come to work higher with cannabis in their systems. Instead, they say the new standard in the version introduced today is going to give Illinois employers the strongest workplace protections in the nation. Another change, Illinois no longer going to allow recreational users to grow cannabis plants at home. Instead, that will be restricted solely to medical marijuana patients. Still, law enforcement says they are opposed.
The concern there still remains in terms of home grow. We don't have access. We won't be able to tell who's doing what. The penalties associated with home grow, anything less than 5 plants, is a civil citation from $100 to a max of $200. That is a concern for us. We want to make sure that it is a strong deterrent from home grow.
Amanda, of course, lots of legislation is moving in the Capitol these last few days, including a gun bill that passed the House. What does that measure do?
This is largely a reaction to that February shooting in Aurora, that is, in which a man was able to get a fire owner's identification card, although due to a previous felony conviction, he shouldn't have been able to do so. He then, of course, did go on a deadly shooting spree. This plan is intended to close the loopholes that allowed him to get that FOID card, also trying to get police more resources and a task force so they can do a better job of taking guns from people whose FOID cards are revoked but don't immediately follow the law in surrendering them. That plan passed the House, but only after hours of debate. Opponents are upset that the measure raises the fee to get one of those FOID cards, and also, in order to get a gun license, people are going to have to get fingerprinted.
Law-abiding gun owners in this state are champions for reducing gun violence. Each of us that has a FOID card that I know personally, which is a lot of our caucus, want to move this forward, want to see gun violence ended. This bill, unfortunately, because of its overreach, doesn't achieve that.
But we have to do something. Gun violence is just plaguing this state and plaguing this country, and we have to start taking steps in the right direction. Are these going to stop violent crimes? No. Can they prevent them? Absolutely. And if we prevent even one crime from happening, I would say that this is a really good idea, and something that we should continue to focus on is public safety.
And just 2 days left in the session, Amanda, what's the status of the budget?
Marinus, you're right, 2 days and so much still unresolved. One measure that did move quickly in the Senate today means that diners in Chicago will have to pay more. This isn't going to help the state budget. Rather, a limited city dining and restaurant tax, or bar and restaurant tax that is going to be extended to a 10-mile radius in order to pay for a $600 million McCormick Place building.
These boundaries were identified on the basis of those of us active in the tourism industry, in partnership with the Restaurant Association, in partnership with Choose Chicago. Because Chicago is now the restaurant capital of the world, we host the James Beard Award. What we tried to do was to increase these boundaries to the modest extent possible to really pick up all the, what I would call the cool new restaurants that all of our conference attendees want to go to.
As for the state budget, I'm told that negotiations are ongoing, but there is a general sense of optimism that it is going to pass on time by Friday at midnight. Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker's spending plan was balanced in part on legalized marijuana, also legalized sports betting. One of the leading, we call them budgeteers here, who are in on those upper level negotiations, says that in fact the spending plan that is soon going to be introduced does not rely on either of those or on anything that there isn't a chance of passing. But what new revenues the spending plan is predicated on, she wouldn't say. Brandis?
Amanda, thank you. We'll see you in a bit. And now to Carol Marine and a high-profile observer of U.S. security and foreign affairs. Carol.
Brandis, Special Counsel Robert Mueller made it clear in today's public announcement there were multiple systemic efforts by Russia to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. There has been recent talk of possible war with Iran, North Korea's launch of missiles, and the continuing conflict in Syria. One thing is clear, tensions remain high regarding U.S. security and foreign affairs. As head of the Department of Defense, our next guest played a central role in U.S. national security during the first half of President Barack Obama's second term. Joining us is Chuck Hegel, who served as United States Secretary of Defense from 2013 to 2015. Previous to that, he was a Republican U.S. Senator representing Nebraska from 1997 to 2009. Secretary Hegel is in town to kick off the Hegel Lecture Series at the University of Chicago. The first speaker for the Security and Foreign Policy Focused program is former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, who will be joining Hegel in conversation at the university tomorrow. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Chicago tonight. Did you watch Robert Mueller's press briefing today?
I did, yes.
What was your take?
It was vintage Robert Mueller. I've known and worked with Bob Mueller for 20 years. He is a consummate professional. Trust, confidence exudes, and everybody I know who know him, worked with him, feels the same. I think today he wanted to do a couple of things. He wanted to give some voice from his lips about the report. I think he also wanted to explain what restrictions he was under during that investigation. He was an employee of the Justice Department. He had to abide by Justice Department regulations. And third, I think he wanted to make the point that there was no exoneration of the President of the United States when it came to obstruction of justice. He did it succinctly, directly, clearly. He said, I don't intend to ever talk about it again in Congress or anywhere else, and this is my time. And that was it.
He said, if we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. Is it your read that the president did commit a crime?
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I've not read all of the report. I've read a lot of it. But I think there are 10 examples of obstruction of justice that that need to be looked at. I think, to me, that's pretty clear. I know that over 900 former Republican and Democratic prosecutors have looked at all of this, and all were unanimous in their evaluation of this is a clear obstruction of justice.
Do you think Mueller is going to have to testify? Regardless of whether he wants to, Congress can compel him, can it not?
It can. He's resigning. He resigned today from the Justice Department, so he's no longer under that shield. If they subpoena him to testify, I think he will honor that subpoena, even though he does not want to. Do I think that Chairman Nadler will call him to testify? I think it's a pretty good bet that he will.
So your assessment of what's just happened vis-a-vis President Trump and National Security Advisor John Bolton with regard to Iran and North Korea. Did, as the New York Times reported today, Trump undercut Bolton?
I think so. This is very dangerous to play this out in public for our allies and our adversaries, where there is a clear disagreement that Trump actually brought on and instigated himself between a president and national security advisor out in the public. The president has made light of it, alluding to the fact that John is the hawk and I'm the dove. And it's not cute. It's not only an embarrassment, but it shakes the confidence and trust our allies have in our policy and our leaders, and it doesn't help any clarity as to what our policy is and what we intended to do or not intend to do. Continuity, clarity are both very important in foreign policy.
You've had some experience in this as Secretary of Defense under Barack Obama. You were executing a foreign policy with Syria that the president backed away from. You were in that same situation. Some might argue, oh, that isn't dysfunction, it's good cop, bad cop.
Well, it wasn't just me, it was the entire National Security Council that were in that position that we had agreed. The president, after hearing the last ideas, and we spent months going over what are our options, what are the president's options, and we concluded, and he concluded, that we would take a certain approach, and then at the last minute he reversed that decision, which had us all hanging out there, but that's the president's decision. He made it for a reason. We honored that. We had our ability to explain what we thought, and that's part of the process.
You know, as a moderate Republican who is in a distinct minority these days in the party, as somebody who served a Democratic president and had not a particularly great experience in that regard, do you sort of feel politically that you, Chuck Hegel, are kind of a man without a party anymore?
Well, I'm still a Republican, whatever that means. So in that sense, I'm not alone in that either. There's a lot of Republicans that don't know what the Republican Party is today. It used to be a party of free trade, fiscal responsibility, international involvement. That's not the same party that I began my career in. I have never ever felt that all my time in public service, the different jobs I've had, have ever been a waste or I didn't enjoy it. Sometimes there are unpleasant parts of any job, of my job, but it's always been a privilege and an honor to serve the country in whatever capacity. But it's a tough business, and I think people go into it, you have to understand that. And I always took the approach that I don't have to be a Secretary of Defense, I don't have to be a senator.
You didn't even seek the Secretary of Defense job.
No, I wasn't looking for a job. In fact, I turned a number of jobs down in the Obama administration because I didn't want a job.
So, circling back to the Mueller report for a second, one Republican in Congress, only one Republican in Congress, has called for impeachment. A number of Democrats, but still a minority of Democrats, have called for it. Are we moving toward impeachment? Should we move toward impeachment? If you were still in Congress, would that be your view?
Well, I think the events of today and Congressman Amish's town hall meeting yesterday, where he articulated his reasoning behind initiating an impeachment inquiry, were pretty strong. And I think because of these two events, it's going to put more and more pressure on Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats to finally start an inquiry. I recognize what Speaker Pelosi is doing, and I think it's the wise thing to do. Let's get facts. Let's let our inquiries play out in the different committees. But I think the pressure is going to continue to build. And who knows what's coming yet? I mean, I think there's a lot yet coming down the pipeline that's not going to be good for President Trump.
What are you thinking of exactly?
Well, you have the Southern District of New York. You've got New York State that's involved. You've got two lower court rulings that went against the president when the House Ways and Means Committee asked for his tax returns. Now an appeals court's going to make a decision on that, to sustain that decision or not, I think, next week. But if that goes against the president, I mean, these are all bad signs that the Congress is going to get a lot of what they have requested. That's going to continue to move the possibility of an impeachment inquiry further along.
Do you know President Trump?
No.
So in your Republican circles and in his Republican circles, you didn't, like a Venn diagram, intersect?
No, well, he's been a little of everything. As you know, he's been a Democrat, a Republican, back, an independent. So it depends on what time he was a Republican. But no, I really never had any reason to know him, to meet him. So I've never met him.
When we start talking about the other parts of what Mr. Mueller said, he makes no bones about the idea that Russian interference existed, and it is something that the American public should take seriously. And yet, it doesn't feel like that's happening nationwide, does it?
No, because it's unfortunately been caught up in this political dynamic that has now controlled and consumed everything. That was a very important point, I thought, that Bob Mueller made this morning. He began that press conference in his comments with that point. Let's go back to the beginning as to why we started the investigation, and the facts are very clear. All of the intelligence agencies in our federal government have said the same thing, have come to the same conclusions, that the Russians interfered in a big way and are probably still doing it, and will probably continue to try to do it in 2020. And you're right, that hasn't gotten, I don't think, the attention that it deserves. It should have gotten, and it's because of the politics of it. And I think President Trump understands that, and I think he's gone out of his way to intentionally distract from that and divide politically. And we find ourselves now in a divisive, polarized, dysfunctional situation in Washington that reflects where I think the country is in a very bitterly polarized way.
So do you have any optimism in your soul about where we're headed in our politics?
Oh, I do, absolutely. I mean, it's just easier to get up in the morning than live through a Greek tragedy. But I do, and I'll tell you one reason, very, very significant. The election we had last November, more than 100 new members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, came to Congress. This is the most diversified group of members. They're younger, they bring different kinds of experiences. They're not political long-timers. They came to, and I've met a lot of them, some work for me. I've met a lot of them. They came because they said, this country's better than what they're seeing. We can do better. We can move forward. We can do the right things for not just this country, but the world. And I'm very optimistic about that. I'm always hopeful, and I think we're going through a very difficult time. It's probably the most difficult political time since World War II. I mean, Watergate was tough, but not anything like this. We're not through it, I think, yet. We got another year and a half that I think it's going to be pretty rough, but we're going to come out of it, and we're going to be better.
We have 20 seconds left. Are you done with political public life in the sense of running for something or being in somebody's cabinet somewhere?
Yes, I've had so many wonderful experiences and opportunities to serve, privilege, honor, enjoyed it. I'll help people, and I continue to still stay active and do a lot of things. That's good, that fits for me, but any elective politics or anything else, we'll let the younger people do it.
All right, you'll do the lecture series instead, right? Thank you so much, Secretary Hegel, for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
More on Chicago Tonight. Stay with us.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/daily briefing and sign up.
Whiplash.
Going for a ride. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, as a teen, he was Bob Fosse's dance partner. Now he's bringing an old routine back to life. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist David Marinus on how his patriotic and communist father was targeted during the Red Scare. And organic gardener Gene Nolan is back in our WTTW garden talking about our crops and the wet weather. But first, as Paris reported earlier, City Council was not without its share of fireworks today as the new guard clashed with the old. And in Springfield, a potpourri of big legislation is flying through the General Assembly. Here to go behind this week's political headlines is our Spotlight Politics team, Paris Schutz and Carol Marine, as well as Amanda Venicky. She's joining us once again from Springfield. Paris, let's start with you. What do you think was behind Burke's concern over gender neutrality today?
I don't know that it was a concern about gender neutrality so much as it was an effort to try and scuttle Mayor Lori Lightfoot's agenda and perhaps put off a vote on these new committee chairs. It backfired. It failed spectacularly because Mayor Lightfoot says, you know, I'm a 30-year prosecutor. Ed Burke, as the Finance Committee chair, he's played this role of prosecutor in the past, grilling people like Lori Lightfoot when she was head of the Police Accountability Task Force. But Lightfoot says, you know, I kind of did this for a living for many years. She turned the tables on him. She acted as prosecutor and quickly kind of got him to quiet his argument, and City Council moved on.
Carol, how'd you read that?
I read it as a really interesting power dynamic. I was struck when she said, Alderman, you have been an alderman for 50 years. Is that correct? And he goes, yes, Your Honor. And I thought, my God, this is like a courtroom. And he's almost responding in that way. Ed Burke is 50 years in. He's got the feds breathing down his neck. A formalized indictment is expected within a week unless they seek a continuation. He's fighting for whatever inches of power he still can maintain. And if today is any evidence, he doesn't have it right now.
Brandon, so let's divide City Council into three groups. There are people that are totally opposed to Mayor Lightfoot. You heard some of them in the earlier segment. There are people that are firmly in her camp, and then there's this group of people in the middle. And, you know, they're going with her right now, and they're not sure, they were kind of uncomfortable with her tone today and how harsh it was. And she was very harsh with her rhetoric, but I think there's a public spectacle here in terms of this election was all about ending business as usual. Lori Lightfoot, the mayor, is playing on that. Ed Burke, whether it's right or wrong, is a convenient piñata. And so the more she acts tough on Alderman Ed Burke, I think the 9 out of 10 reactions from the general public are going to be, go get him. Yeah, right on.
Well, and she also, you know, she won a landslide victory today. Our alderman, is this going to look like sort of the rubber stamp city council we've seen before?
You know, I don't think it will be a rubber stamp city council, but I think she'll have a clear majority virtually all of the time or much of the time. But the interesting thing, Paris, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the meeting was over, she went and listened to the public comment.
Well, before the meeting, she did sit there and listen to the public comment. Mayor Emanuel did do that sometimes. She listened and acknowledged the speakers. You know, as these meetings kind of go on over the years, I don't know how much of an appetite she's going to have because this can get very, very long and tedious. But she made an important point to sit there and listen to all the public commenters.
And I think that's the statement that that we can't miss. It's that, yes, this is a landslide election. It was a change the guard. It was going to be don't do it the old way. And listening to that public comment in a very respectful way, in addition to slapping Alderman Burke, I think sent two messages.
Okay, and I want to come back to the city, but I want to get Amanda in here a little bit because we also know there's obviously a lot going on in Springfield, Amanda. So though the state's abortion bill passed out of the House yesterday, there was a bit of a dust-up over it today. What's going on?
Yesterday, during that House debate, Republicans, though many legislators, none voted for it, had a lot of feelings about it. They, by and large, just allowed one of their members to do the debating for them, and that is Representative Avery Bourne. She's from just outside, really, of Springfield, and as you are perhaps able to see in a video there, she is visibly pregnant. She is due with a baby in July. Today, you had a press conference during which Terry Cosgrove, who's the leader of Personal PAC, a pro-reproductive rights organization that's been very outspoken in trying to get this measure passed, basically referred to Representative Bourne as a prop, saying that it was a cheap political stunt for Republicans to have put her forward and used her as their unofficial spokesperson during the debate. Republicans, of course, took umbrage with that. Bourne is an assistant leader. She frequently, in fact, speaks up on the House floor here, and they said that she, of course, had heartfelt feelings on protecting unborn lives. You did have Cosgrove later apologize. He said that it was unfair and inappropriate and ignored her heartfelt passion for the issue, and he plans to personally apologize to Bourne.
Amanda, I'm going to come back to you in just a second. Carol, what's your take on, A, what the Republicans did by having this one speaker yesterday, but then the response to it today, and then the apology?
I mean, it's a powerful picture. It's a powerful message. And for them, this was a way to try to leverage the argument in their favor when all evidence was they were going to lose this vote in all probability. Terry Cosgrove is an impassioned advocate for reproductive rights without any question, and can be kind of take no prisoners. But, you know, I haven't heard him apologize very often, but he felt that he had gone too far and said so. Whether that will ameliorate the situation in any way, I think this legislation is going forward regardless.
Now, tonight there's also a big party at the governor's mansion. Amanda, what do we know about this and what's going on?
This is a celebration for Secretary of State Jesse White, who turns 85 next month. But there is a bit of going back to history here, because you'll remember when J.B. Pritzker had his big celebration, his inauguration party, there was going to be a surprise musical guest. It ended up being Maroon 5, but nobody knew that until really Maroon 5 and Adam Levine took the stage. There is again going to be a surprise guest, this time coming to the lawn of the governor's mansion. Word has seemed to gotten leaked out, but we will see. In fact, that party is set to begin any minute now, hearing that it's going to be George Clinton performing. This, I guess, is what happens when you have a very wealthy governor who is able to pay these superstars, the king of funk coming to Springfield. Pritzker is going to evidently be paying the tab for that out of his own pocket, and his office not saying how much that will be. There are going to be, however, food, beer flowing, and that is mostly through donations.
Amanda, thank you. And Paris, we're almost out of time, but what's the latest with the plan to tear down the old McCormick Place Lakeside building?
This is something that seemed to come out of nowhere. So the plan today is to expand the taxing district that funds McCormick Place. So there's a 1% added sales tax on restaurants in the Central District. They want to expand that 1% taxing district out to like Hyde Park, Lakeview, and then west to Western Avenue. That means a lot more people are going to pay higher sales tax to fund the teardown of the old McCormick Place Lakeside Center and to build a new building. Mayor Lightfoot today did not say whether she supported or opposed this, but there are some aldermen saying, whoa, 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 this is going to be a pretty tough hit on Chicago taxpayers. The idea of a McCormick Place tax is to hit the conventioners. So if you're taxing people that are going to dinner in Logan Square or Hyde Park, those aren't conventioners, those are Chicago residents.
And to your point, if there isn't a rubber stamp city council, it's going to be in and around issues of taxation. Those are going to be the toughest votes for these aldermen, especially the ones in the middle, as Paris says, to have to stick their names on.
All right, our Spotlight Politics team always on top of it. Paris Schutz, Carol Marine, Amanda Vinicky in Springfield for us. Thanks, guys. The new TV series Fosse Verdon just wrapped up on the FX network. Legendary choreographer Bob Fosse grew up and got his start in Chicago. And there's one man who knows that part of his life better than anyone. Jay Shefsky has his story.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Two dancers work on a new routine. Nothing unusual about that, except that this is in fact a very old routine. They're recreating a dance that this man performed nearly 80 years ago. His name is Charlie Grass. He's 91.
I can't tell jokes all the time.
And you may have heard of his childhood dance partner, Bob Fosse. Yes, that Bob Fosse. A talented dancer who went on to have a monumental impact as a choreographer and director. From age 12 to 17, Bob Fosse and Charlie Grass performed as the Riff Brothers. They met at age 7 at a North Side Chicago dance school. The owner put the boys on stage together when they were 11. Brother acts were all the rage. The Berry Brothers, the Step Brothers, and especially the Nicholas Brothers.
So guess what? It was Bob and Charles Riff, brothers. We started making money when we were 12 in 39. I mean, we liked to practice together and work hard. We'd go to the theaters and watch the same movie over maybe 2 or 3 times, pick up ideas.
This is the one where you said we could use our shoulder a little more.
Janae Kutcher and Heather Brown initially learned the dance from this 75-year-old dance notation. Janae runs the Chicago Dance History Project. That's how she got to know Charlie and his old Riff Brothers notation.
Because I'm a tap dancer, I could understand what I was reading, and so I asked Charlie, you know, can I learn this? Can I teach it to myself from paper? Would that be okay?
But notation only records the steps. They needed Charlie for things like style and upper body movement. And Charlie had no trouble remembering those details.
We did the act for about 5 years, you know, the same steps and all that. So it does stay with you.
One thing that makes recreating it more challenging is that tap dance has changed in the last 80 years. Janae says that these days, upper body movement is not a big priority.
We prioritize sound and energy more, so wherever your arms go and however they need to go in order to make the sounds you want to make, that's perfectly acceptable.
Today's tap is more down to earth, you know, and the feet are the instruments, where years ago it was more style.
Charlie says it's the difference between Bill Robinson or Fred Astaire and Gregory Hines. The end of the Riff Brothers came when Bob Fosse graduated from high school in 1945, a semester ahead of Charlie Grass. Bob was itching to leave Chicago, and he encouraged Charlie to skip that last semester and join him on the road. Charlie says he has no regrets.
It was a hard life, a gypsy life, living out of suitcases and that. I was sort of a home guy, you know, family guy.
But Charlie Grass still had his own long and busy dance career. Ballet soloist, choreographer, and especially as a beloved teacher. Charlie married, had 6 kids, and beginning in his 40s when the dance work dried up, he worked as a pipe fitter like his dad until he retired. Bob Fosse died of a heart attack in 1987 at age 60.
I guess Bob's waiting for me up there. Finish the routine. I personally think that the happiest part of his life is with me. Those 10 years from 7 to 17 as teenagers growing up together. But I'm proud of him. And I was, a little bit of the Riff Brothers went with him. On that one step.
Yeah.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
Not perfect.
The first public performance of the recreated Riff Brothers dance will be June 26th at the Burger Park Theater on the lakefront. It was performed once before earlier this month at a dance symposium, and there's a video of that on our website, along with information on the Burger Park performance, which we are told Charlie Grass himself is planning to attend. Pulitzer Prize-winning author David Marinus has written acclaimed biographies of Roberto Clemente, Vince Lombardi, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. But his new book is far more personal. It looks at how his father's career was, for many years, derailed after he was named as a member of the Communist Party. It's called A Good American Family, The Red Scare, and My Father. And author David Marinus joins us now. He's an associate editor at The Washington Post. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you, Brandis. Great to be here.
Of course. So why write this book now?
Well, I actually started it before some of the themes became relevant again. But I wanted, you know, I'd spent my career studying, writing about strangers who, at the start, you know, whether it was Lombardi or Clemente or Obama or Clinton. And after 4 years of research, they became very familiar to me. Very few of us have a biographer going back into the mythology of our own families. And I realized that what had happened to my father was so important to my development, to my siblings' development, and so interesting in illuminating a segment of our culture during a very difficult time, that I wanted to explore that, and that's why I went back into it. Started about 4 years ago.
And you also wanted to wait until your parents had both passed.
Absolutely.
Why was that important?
Because my father did not talk about this. He was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1952. I was 2 years old. By the time I reached any sort of political consciousness, he had survived and moved on. And he taught me, at a fairly early age, never to fall for any rigid ideology, to search for the truth wherever it took me. But what happened to him was just a shadow in our lives after that. And I wanted to honor his desire not to have it talked about. Really, it wasn't that he was embarrassed about it, it's just that he didn't want to be defined by that period in his early life. So I waited until he was gone.
Now, many people who were caught up in the Red Scare of the time were wrongfully accused.
Yes.
But your parents were actually members of the Communist Party. Why did they join?
Well, you have to understand the context of the 1930s. My father grew up in Brooklyn in the 1930s when 40% of the men there were unemployed during the Great Depression. It was during a time when fascism was on the rise in Europe, in Italy, and Germany. And as is so often in American history, the problems of race and racism were prevalent. And so I think it was those three factors that pushed him toward the Communist Party. My question really is not so much why he joined, but why he stayed in the party for longer than I would have expected. So as I was he would later explain that he was stubborn in his ignorance. But as I researched the book, there were times when I would shake my head and said, "Dad, why were you thinking that?" But nonetheless, he did get through it. He did survive. He had a terrific career after that as a newspaper man. And the lessons he taught me were sort of what he learned through that experience.
Your father also commanded an all-black unit in the Army during World War II. How did that affect him?
Deeply. My father's commitment to racial justice was very strong from the beginning. Interestingly, he was made the commander of an all-black unit really because of his radical past at the University of Michigan. The Army was segregated in World War II. The military was racist. And so black units often had white, or almost predominantly had white officers. They tended to be either Southerners, steeped in the racism of the South, who dealt with blacks. You're from Mississippi, you understand that.
That's true.
Or Northern radicals who wouldn't mind being would consider it an honor to be the officer for that group. So in this book, I found 100 letters that my father wrote during that period when he was training and commanding the all-black unit. And what you see through that is both his love of America and his concern about the unmet promise, and particularly dealing with young black men who are being asked to fight and perhaps die for their country, for liberty and democracy, in a country that was treating them as second-class citizens. And so in those letters, you see him talking about that, and also about how proud he was that his men thought that they were getting a fair shake from him.
In your research, you found a statement of your father's that he was not allowed to deliver when he was called in front of the HUAC.
1952, the transcript has my father saying, "I'd like to deliver a statement about what I consider it means to be an American." The chairman of the committee, who was from Georgia, who had voted against every civil rights bill for decades and for the poll tax to keep blacks from voting, denied my father that right, said basically that he could not deliver a statement unless he sought absolution for his sins and named names, which my father refused to do. So the statement basically was put into the files and unread for 63 years until I went to the National Archives in Washington, found the boxes of archival documents on those hearings in Detroit, and there in a file, Elliot Marinus was the statement of Elliot Marinus.
And obviously we have a limited amount of time, but you found that statement. What did it say?
It was a very powerful 3-page statement about sort of the meaning of freedom of speech and freedom of the press and the importance of civil liberties to American democracy.
How did the Red Scare and all of this affect your father's career as a newsman?
Well, he was fired from his job at the Detroit Times and blacklisted for 5 years. We bounced around from his parents' house in Brooklyn to my mother's parents' house in Ann Arbor to Cleveland briefly until the FBI came there and said, you hired a former communist when he worked for the Plain Dealer. He was fired from that job. Finally, we ended up in a small town in Iowa where he was the editor of a labor paper. And it was from that the progressive editor of the Capital Times in Madison, Wisconsin, who had been fighting Joe McCarthy and McCarthyism for years, saw this little paper, thought it was terrific, said, who's running it? Found out it was Elliot Marinus and hired him. We got to Madison in 1957. Joe McCarthy had just died. The Milwaukee Braves were on their way to winning the World Series. I was 7 years old, and that was our salvation from then on.
As a child, did you, or at what point did you start to sort of come to an understanding of what had happened to your parents and to your father?
Certainly not when I was 2, and really not until maybe in my early teens. It was always sort of a shadow of our existence. I knew that we moved around a lot when I was very young, and that he had suffered some trauma and survived it. So it wasn't talked about in our family, but it was known but unstated.
Are there parts, and you've mentioned this, that there were parts of the communist belief system and that your parents obviously followed when they were members of the Communist Party, that you couldn't quite square with your own beliefs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, as I said, there were times when I shook my head and said, what were you thinking? Especially when he was the editorial editor of the student newspaper at the University of Michigan in 1939 and wrote some editorials rationalizing the Soviet Nazi Defense Pact. After 3 years where many of his friends went over to Spain to fight against fascism in the Spanish Civil War, how could he defend the Nazis and the Soviets agreeing to this? There were several instances like that where I shook my head and said, what were you thinking, Dad? But I knew a different father from that. He had learned and moved on from that by the time I was conscious.
We've got about 20 seconds left. The book is titled A Good American Family. What is a good American family?
Well, it's very diverse. And the efforts to narrow that definition and say only people who believe in certain things are good American families is bogus, and that's what this book tries to refute. My family is and was a very good American family.
David Marinus, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, the new book from David Marinus is A Good American Family, The Red Scare and My Father. And you can meet him tomorrow night at the bookstall in Winnetka. You can find some details on our website. Well, it's been an exceptionally soggy spring, but I'm sure that hasn't deterred any of you hardy gardeners out there. One gardener we can count on, whatever the weather, is Jean Nolan, and she joined us earlier today on a rare sunny afternoon to assess progress in our WTTW organic garden. Let's take a look. So last time you were here, we were talking about putting in and growing plants that are specifically good for the cold.
That's right.
How's that stuff going?
It is going very, very well. So everything that you see here was planted on May 1st, so exactly 1 month ago. And some things are ready to eat.
Already?
So we actually have some
That's
of
good,
these
'cause I'm hungry.
beautiful, it's called a French breakfast radish. They're my favorite. And I love them because they are so
Look at that
pretty.
little guy.
So if you look here, yeah, they're really nice, and they're young.
Oh, this one's cute and tiny. Look at that one.
But most of the crops in the garden should be eaten when they're really young. That's when they're delicious. So don't wait. These are ready now.
So we can eat these now.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And the other crop that's on its way to being ready is this kohlrabi.
Which is a beautiful
Isn't it
purple
so
color.
pretty? And our viewers voted. They wanted to grow the purple, not
Okay.
the green. And they'll be ready soon.
Now, last time we also talked about sort of the companionship. They're
That's
friends.
right. They're friends. So
between the
what's-
fennel and the kohlrabi.
That's right. So what's going on here? This is cauliflower, broccoli, kohlrabi. They're part of the brassica family. It also includes kale and cabbage and a few other crops. They are susceptible to a pest insect that we're going to see soon. First sighting of them are the little white moths flying around. Then you see some little holes in your plants and teeny green worms, caterpillars. Those can be hand-picked off, but the reason that we grow this fennel, it's a companion plant. It actually deters the bad bug that likes these crops. So they do well together, and we typically plant them together.
All right. And speaking of like fun, beautiful colors, there's obviously the purple and the kohlrabi, but the Swiss chard is it's yellow.
It's
I'm not
one
sure
of my
everybody's used to
favorites.
seeing that.
Right, so often we grow red chard or rainbow chard, which is gold, red, pink, white. This year I am on an obsession with the gold chard. I just think it's so pretty, planted as a group. And chard is chard, no matter what color it is, it's delicious.
Let's talk about this garlic, like these tall guys up front.
So all of this is our beautiful garlic. Believe it or not, it was planted on October 18th. So we planted cloves of garlic, spread about 6 inches apart. They overwinter, they sit in the soil all winter. As soon as it's warm, they pop up, and we will be eating what are called garlic scapes, the little curlicues, within the next month. Then we will be harvesting the whole bulb of garlic a couple months, depending on the weather. So it's such a neat crop to grow here.
Speaking of the weather, so
Right,
today
the
we're thankful for some
weather.
sun, but we've gotten a lot of rain.
That's
How is
right.
that impacting crops, and are some people just going to have to call it and try something
Well, the
later?
truth is, everything we've planted thus far in the garden is doing very well. We're kind of at a turning point. If it continues to be cool and rain this much, it will mean trouble for our crops. But so far, so good. In this bed, we are growing the crops to make a great salsa. So that includes a tomatillo, and it's a green tomatillo as opposed to purple, per our viewer's choice.
And you can't have salsa without cilantro.
Cilantro, that's right, exactly.
So tell me, how does this work? Because
Right, so growing cilantro is interesting, and I learned the hard way. I actually had a suburban grower, I'd been gardening 20 years, finally teach me how to grow cilantro. And the trick is, you always grow it from seed. You do not buy a plant and put that in the ground, because it'll last about a week. The other crops are plants.
Okay.
And the reason that they are plants is they grow slowly. They've gotten a head start in a greenhouse, so that within our short growing season in Chicago, we'll actually harvest fruit.
And Jean Nolan will be back next month with more tips on getting the most out of your vegetable garden. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also watch via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Power shifts in the new City Council. Find out the key players in the new alignment. And a look at the 500,000 Legos that make up a new Morton Arboretum exhibition. And we leave you tonight with some pictures of the Skokie North Shore Sculpture Park. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.